chapter 3. You stupid Galatians, who has put you under a spell? Before your very eyes, Yeshua the Messiah was clearly portrayed as having been put to death as a criminal. I want to know from you just this one thing. Did you receive the Spirit by legalistic observance of the Torah commands, or by trusting in what you heard and being faithful to it? Are you that stupid? Have you begun with the Spirit's power? Do you think you can reach the goal under your own power? Have you suffered so much for nothing? If that's the way you think, your suffering certainly will have been for nothing. What about God, who supplies you with the Spirit and works miracles among you? Does he do it because of your legalistic observance of Torah commands, or because you trust in what you heard and that you're faithful to it? It was the same with Abraham. He trusted in God and was faithful to him, and that was credited to his account as righteousness. Be assured then that it is those who live by trusting and being faithful who are really children of Abraham. Also, the Tanakh, foreseeing that God would consider the Gentiles righteous when they live by trusting and being faithful, told the good news to Abraham in advance by saying, in connection with you, all the Goyim will be blessed. So then, those who rely on trusting and being faithful are blessed along with Abraham, who trusted and was faithful. For everyone who depends upon legalistic observance of the Torah commands lives under a curse, since it is written, "Cursed is everyone who does not keep on doing everything that is written in the scroll of the Torah." Now it is evident that no one comes to be declared righteous by God through legalism, since the person who is righteous will attain life by trusting and being faithful. Furthermore, legalism is not based on trusting and being faithful, but on a misuse of the text that says anyone who does these things will attain life through them. The Messiah redeemed us from the curse pronounced in the Torah by becoming cursed on our behalf. For the Tanakh says, everyone who hangs from a stake comes under a curse. Yeshua the Messiah did this so that in union with him, the Gentiles might receive the blessing announced to Abraham, so that through trusting and being faithful, we might receive what was promised, namely the Spirit. So Paul's talking here about the promise of Abraham, and how through him all nations are going to be blessed. Okay? But he's emphasizing the Gentiles. He's emphasizing the nations. He's talking about legalistic observance of Torah. Okay, let me make this one point here. Paul isn't saying that the Torah is done away with. He's saying that you shouldn't try to live Torah commands legalistically. Torah is an act of love. And so what happened is that within this period of time, within this Messianic era, there were a majority of leaders who were pursuing Torah in a very legalistic manner, which was incorrect. They were misinterpreting it. They were not correctly living Torah. And that's why Yeshua calls everybody to it. He says, you dishonor your parents by your traditions. You know? It says, thou shalt honor thy mother and father. And Jesus is basically saying, you're not honoring your mother and father. Whatever you're doing, you're not honoring your mother and father. You know, you may think you're living Torah, but you're not honoring your mother and father. So yeah, I mean, that doesn't do away with Torah. Torah is still an everlasting covenant. But, Messiah has shown us, he's called everybody to the mat again, He's restored it. He's renewed it. And he's now brought into the nations. He's brought the Goyim in now. Okay, so moving on. Chapter 3, verse 15. Brothers, let me make an analogy from everyday life. When someone swears an oath, no one else can set it aside or add to it. Now the promises were made to Abraham and to his seed. It doesn't say, and to seeds, as if to many. On the contrary, it speaks of one, and to your seed. And this one is the Messiah. Here is what I'm saying. The legal part of the Torah, which came into being 430 years later, does not nullify an oath sworn by God so as to abolish the promise. For if the inheritance comes from the legal part of the Torah, it no longer comes from a promise, but God gave it to Abraham through a promise. Okay? Let me just stop. That's pretty clear there. And what Paul is saying is, look, God made a promise to Abraham 430 years prior to the Torah, to the giving of the Torah. So what he's saying is, what came into being 430 years later, that is the Torah, the Mosaic covenant, does not nullify what God promised to Abraham. Okay? And in a similar like fashion, we can say the same thing about the Messianic covenant. That what God brought in the Torah prior to the coming of the Messiah is not nullified in the coming of the Messiah. The Messianic covenant doesn't do away with the Mosaic covenant. Okay, so very simple concepts here, folks. Verse 19. So then, why the legal part of the Torah? It was added in order to create transgressions until the coming of the seed about whom the promise had been made. Moreover, it was handed down through angels and a mediator. Now, a mediator implies more than one, but God is one. Now, that's a powerful statement right there. We all know the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Now, what that means, a lot of people have fallen into this idea that means that God is one. God is one. He's not three. He's one. Well, actually, what that really means is that God is the only one. There are no other gods. Because in the giving of this commandment in Torah, the context is talking about the gods of the other nations. And when Israel says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," what they're really saying is, there is only one God. There is no other gods amongst the nations. Now, what is the nature of the oneness of God? There's a lot to be said in regard to the unity of the Lord. There's much to be said in the Kabbalah about the emanations of the Lord. Now, is God three? Well, we don't know. I mean, it doesn't say in Scripture that God is three. It never says God is three. It does talk about the seven spirits of God. So, you know, I'm not going to get into a discussion here on the divinity of the Messiah, because I was told by one of the leaders at my synagogue that it's not really an issue as to how much of God the Messiah is. Or, you know, we're not told that. We're not really given that. What we're told is that he is Messiah. How much of the Lord is the Messiah? Who knows? And it's not really something that we discuss, because it's frankly not important to the conversation, is what I've come to realize. But I'm perfectly capable of accepting my Protestant brothers and sisters and their Trinitarian ideas. I was raised a Trinitarian, so I know what it is to worship as a Trinitarian, and I know what it is to worship as a monotheist. And so it's all semantics, folks. It's all semantics. The key is that the Messiah has a pre-existence. And this verse here is really hits it on the nail. Verse 19, chapter 3. So then, why the legal part of the Torah? It was added in order to create transgressions until the coming in of the seed about whom the promise had been made. Moreover, it was handed down through angels and a mediator. Now, a mediator implies that more than one, but God is one. So you can see where I'm getting at here. It's very powerful. Okay, so basically, verse 19, verse 20, is talking about when the Torah was given to Moses. And it says in 19, when it was handed down through the angels and a mediator. Now, a mediator implies more than one, but God is one. So, I don't know what Paul's trying to say here, but he's definitely alluding to something, and we'll just leave it at that.